Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Greg Mader. I'm the president of Open Source Integrators. I'd like to spend a little bit of time this afternoon talking about how we replaced SAP B1 in a customer, and a little bit about the customer, but as much as anything, I really want to talk about the process and how they made that decision as well. I'm joined today by Jennifer Campbell, our vice president, who was the project manager on this project. And we're at this point now. It's funny, this seems so fresh to me, but this is actually at a point now it's very mature, and SAP is long gone in their rearview mirror. So good job on that, Jen. Thank you. So, yeah, Jen. Woo. Okay. So the customer is a company called FRU Process Group. It's part of a consortium with AB Young and Gasco. If the people from Fulton Boiler are here, they would know all about these people. They sell industrial components, but specifically things like pumps, valves, and controllers, industrial boilers, natural gas regulators. If you're thinking about like real hardcore technology for industry, that's what these guys were in the middle of. They really struggled with SAP Business One. They tried using it, and I stress the word tried, using it for 8 years to create some sort of a system that would give them some differentiation or competitive advantage. What they ended up realizing was that SAP Business One was really inflexible, and that the support channel of partners and vendors was not able to overcome that inflexibility. And it really was, how many of you have heard this about any SAP product, that you will adapt your business systems to fit the way SAP thinks you should do it? Yes? Raise of hands, how many have heard this? Okay, how many of you have heard SAP is really flexible and you can adapt it to your business processes? Okay, one. And the truth is yes, it can be adapted to business processes, but it's more work and money. Yes, exactly. A nice buddy poppy, by the way. As a veteran, thank you. I appreciate that. So that's cool. So they went so far, FRU went so far as to actually use their partner of the year from SAP to try to get this adaptation, the adaptations they needed done, and really were never able to get to the results they wanted. It was at that point that they really decided, okay, we've tried it, we've tried the partners, we're looking for something that helped us build a competitive advantage, and we need to try something different. Scott Young, the president and CEO of FRU, considered a lot of options, and open source was not the only one. And he's not an open source zealot. It wasn't just because he thought, oh, this is going to be cheaper. He really was looking for freedom and flexibility and competitive advantage. What he loved about the open source side with that freedom and flexibility is that he had access to all the source code, and that helped him gain control of his workflow and design a business to go in line with the vision that he was presenting. So the development, as he kind of went through it, and I think this is important, these are actually his words and his slides, and he's been nice enough to share, and we've had very open discussions about this. The capital investment is a little bit cheaper, and anyone that thinks Odoo is going to be free and easy is probably not giving you the full picture. But it is a lower capital investment. The operating costs as well were a little bit lower, and the development costs were about the same. And I think that reflects what we've seen with other customers as well. Again, we talked about the customization flexibility, and truly with FRU, there was this grand design at the beginning to create and sustain a competitive advantage, to do something that really set them apart in these industrial systems. So how did we start this? We started with something pretty small, and the idea was, let's just do a short proof of concept or pilot together, work together for about a week, doing some knowledge transfer of the requirements, understanding the specific business unit needs for each of these three businesses. Remember, it's a consortium of three businesses that share some resources but have fundamentally different business models, and work out some things that were pretty important, some goals, a criteria of success, a schedule and budget, and some sort of prototype that everyone can kick the tires on and agree that, yes, this is working the way we think it should. To this idea of design, of defined business flows, this was something really important. And back to, they had a vision for how they wanted the business to operate. We spent a lot of time, actually kind of a countless amount of time when I look back on it, to make sure that we really were coming up with optimizations for this specialized sales management, for commission and margin calculation, for accurate and complete accounting. Their accounting manager certainly was not shy with either of us as she was evaluating this and making sure that the numbers matched and were complete. And we did have to think about the data migration. They brought over a significant amount of data from B1. But still, with all of this, really having some sense of flexibility and for future projects here. We then got to the actual project itself and automation here. How many of you saw our discussions here on CRM earlier? It was yesterday that Rich did. Okay. So Rich actually talked about this a lot, and I talked about it earlier today on some of the predictive analytics we're doing. There's a great deal of effort that went into having partners' data standardization and specifically around customer data. This company took a very advanced approach in their CRM of identifying every, I want to make sure everyone hears this because this was mind-blowing to me. What if you could identify every possible potential customer you have in the country? That was the goal we had here. And that meant the data had to be very clean, very well organized, and have attribution that was sufficient so that we could still get very granular and do very specific targeting of key accounts or potential new accounts that we thought were significant. We spent a lot of work on Hoover's data and Dun & Bradstreet data, merging, cleaning, and coming up with a CRM loaded with absolutely the best data we could possibly give them, really enabling their sales effort. We merged partner records between existing systems and did a large amount of cleanup there, as one can imagine. But what that really enabled was this idea of marketing campaign management, where we could have extremely targeted campaigns that were specifically not broadcast but narrowcast to exact audiences with exactly the right messaging. It was no accident. Again, they were trying to create and sustain this competitive advantage, and in their case, this investment in sales was very important to them. One thing I'd like to talk about that I think is fascinating, one of their product lines was a natural gas regulator line, or product line. And natural gas regulators come in several standard-sized bodies. If you ever look outside a building, you'll see, okay, it's small, medium, or large. And they use different orifices and different springs to manage different pressures and different flows that go through there. So you can imagine if you have an apartment building at the end of a natural gas main, you're going to need a weaker spring to allow more gas to flow in there. It's going to be at a lower pressure because it's at the end of the line. If you're a small house at the beginning of the gas line main, you are going to need probably a smaller body but with a very stiff spring because the pressures are going to be higher. Why am I bringing this up? It meant we needed to do some modification to the MRP tool to be able to allow the mix and match between these different regulators. So within their inventory of regulators, they needed to be able to rebuild these regulators into any other kind, depending on where, who the end house or building was going to be, and their specific demands on natural gas. So we came up with this thing, what we called an easy MRP. We used basic Odoo, but you notice up here we had some specific lines of being able to assemble and disassemble each and every part into any other kind of part as we went. We also had to know where to get more parts if we didn't have that specific body or orifice on hand. Was it available someplace else or in a different warehouse or from a different box that we could pull apart? So, and I'm impressed with Olivier being here because you can tell me all the things I did wrong on this. So you'll have all kinds of better ideas for how we should have done that. But this allowed us to create an inventory that was essentially unlimited, where we could, back to trying to enable sales, a customer would call up, we could target customers that we knew were in the middle of a building project, and we knew maybe even that they had something that was kind of unique about their needs. They would respond to that targeted marketing and say, okay, you're right, I need 100 regulators and I need them in these different sizes. When can you deliver them? Through this set of tools, we can say, no problem. We'll have those regulators shipped out to you next Tuesday, and it will be exact, and they'll be ordered in the right box numbers, so you'll know exactly the right ones to install in which parts of your system. That is a competitive advantage. And you can see why that matters. We were able to turn this into something where they clearly were able to respond more effectively with better engineering to their customers as they were doing it. Another slide of the same thing. So I'll keep going. I could spend all day talking about some of this. To the marketing automation, we did have this idea of being able to integrate Dun & Bradstreet data, Hoover's data, but also do geocoding so we could get to the address and actual location of each additional, of all of our customers, including their satellite offices. That not only helped for delivery, but again, we're saying that sales is part of our competitive advantage. It allowed us to target our outside salespeople more effectively so that they could maybe visit more customers on a single trip, maybe get in one more visit, one more sales call. And by doing that, we were able to, again, increase the efficiency of that team. So we added a lot of additional data to the the basic CRM, over 30 characteristics, as a matter of fact. So it allowed us to kind of ask these questions about which customer classes should we pursue, what products do we sell that align with those needs, and we were able to also integrate this in with the GIS system, and I'll show a little bit of that here in a second. This is not all 30 characteristics we added to a specific partner, but you can see a few more columns that were added here. NAICS codes, 6 codes, a little bit more about trade name and everything. But here on an actual partner record, you can see a few things that were added, including ultimately things like their location, any financial information, even things like square footage where we actually knew how big their facility was. So one thing we had to do, again, we have inside and outside sales. We had to come up with a portal view in order to allow the outside sales people to be able to easily understand what was going on. So this was based on some customized dashboards for sales orders and invoices by product group and territory, quick view of the accounts, payables and receivables, so a salesperson, when they were out in the field, could really gather information quickly about the customer visits that they were going to do that day. If somebody owed them money or was a slow payer, that's one part of the conversation is, hey, I want I want to sell you more valves, but can you take care of this payment that's sitting on the books? Things like that. So lastly, we also came up with some automated reports based on using Pentaho as the BI engine. These days, I'd probably look at some other BI engines, but at the time, Pentaho answered the mail very well for us. How many of you have ever worked with salespeople in some way, shape, or form? Okay. Have you noticed that commissions are very important, and they like to see a scoreboard, and they like to see where they're at? Turns out salespeople for here are no different. So this booking report and some of the other things we'll show were a big part of this, where we could really be able to help that salesperson feel like they could keep tally of what they were, how productive they were, and feel good about their successes and know where to keep going at. So some of the things, we went further and used Kettle as well, and I'm not going to get into all of this here, but we found this to be, at the time, the best BI engine that we could use. We did have sales goals that were integrated with Pentaho reports. We could identify key and target account definitions and really come up with some interesting Pentaho reports. I'm more interested in what I'm about to show you here, and this was our first version, and this has come a long ways since then. But it's GIS integration, where we could map all customer locations. Again, we knew where every single potential customer of ours in the country was at. We could do some cluster analysis, some key and target account identification. We could filter by SIX codes or NAICS codes, revenue, number of orders, sales by products. And this is definitely kind of our version 1.0. If those of you that are interested in GIS integration and visualization, please come talk to me, or Wolfgang, can you raise your hand? Talk to Wolfgang after this as well, and we can show you some of the later evolutions of this technology that we've done. A little bit more. This is, again, what a salesperson would see in the field. It doesn't look like Odoo, but it's still all Odoo. This is just Odoo, and I'm sure you're looking at it and saying, okay, you reskinned it, you'd put a different front end on it. But yeah, this was for our field salespeople, just to have something that was quick and easy that they could use on a tablet, and it would be effective for them. So each point pulls Odoo data for sales orders, sales metrics, contacts. In the future, and actually we've done this with some other customers, is some color coding, some heat maps that are much prettier, and some custom icons as well. Okay. So we went live, and all the things you hear about going live applied here as well. Just because we're leaving SAP Business One, and these are people that have already been used to an ERP, that doesn't mean change management is easier. In fact, they've had expectations set by a different system, and we have to break those expectations and prove that we're better and this is a better idea. How many of you have ever had a problem with change management with user adoption? Only that many hands, really? Okay. Okay. I'm going to talk about one of the advantages Odoo has. Odoo really does, the Odoo team puts a lot of effort in usability. I think we've seen that. I do believe that's a strength. And I do believe Odoo is significantly easier to train people on, and it feels good as you're going through it. When we went through our own Odoo finance implementation this spring, I'll never forget my CFO telling me that I like working on this. This is fun. And it led, how many of you are Marie Kondo fans? Anybody? I am. So I love this idea of does your ERP spark joy? That's what I think we should all shoot for in our implementations. okay? We carefully manage scope and budget, and in this customer, like every other, that was something that was under constant scrutiny. We found by building that core team that was the experts in release and training, that was really important. So I'm a strong believer in trying to build a core team at the customer organization that's going to be your change champions. I've heard that term many times. We actually worked very closely so as that we were hiring as this company was hiring new staff, that they were on board and they were feeling supported. And really, with all of our stakeholders, there was this sense of constant conversation and making sure that we were addressing the real concerns, and at the same time not getting stuck on things that really were cosmetic or could be treated differently. So the results. Okay, back to why did we leave SAP B1? We were locked in and we couldn't get that competitive advantage. It turned a great business into something of a commodity. We were like, you know, if Scott was here, he would say we were fighting not to be like everybody else. So we were able, with all of the little pieces I showed you, we were able to streamline our sales, our manufacturing, our delivery process, and really create an efficient and highly differentiated approach for their end customers. We definitely were able to help reveal new opportunities here through very simple, and I mean it, very simple business intelligence around their Dun & Bradstreet data and their GIS visualization. The side benefit about it, and you can kind of tell I feel connected to these people, but you know, they're extremely close friends, and we do have very much this vested interest in each other, and beyond that, a deep friendship and real sense of camaraderie even now. You can lie to a lot of people, you can't lie to your ERP vendor. I don't know if you guys have figured that out. You know, so you learn a lot about each other along the way. So Scott, who I wish was here with me, said this about us. I want to point the kind words back at him. The fact that they had this clear vision in their mind and they were able to articulate it made this a great project. It was really easy to be a partner and help them achieve the goals that they were asking. So I think with that, the way I would beat SAP B1 really kind of comes down to this: take the high road, be the best, you know, offer the best approach for their implementation, but really focus on that freedom and flexibility in creating a competitive advantage. So that's it. Thank you. What questions do you have for me? Questions? Please.
What was the integration of the SAP with one of the customer, and how do you do that if they have add-ons or something similar, and you have to replicate it?
We did have a number of key functionality points that were built in SAP B1 that we studied, and we had to come up with a design that would incorporate those sort of some of that specialized functionality in Odoo as well. There's always the question, to that point, when you're doing an ERP implementation, is how much are you willing to change your business practices to fit the ERP? Any quick start consultants in here from Odoo? Okay, one. This is what you tell your customers every day, right? Is how much of this can you change? Can you please try to do it my way? That's a good place to start. We start that same way too, but there are some things where they're going to say, no, you really do need to change the software to fit our business as well. And my opinion, the right place to try, and this is bigger than your question, the right number is you should be greater than 80% out of the box or community modules or pre-existing work and less than 20% customization. Olivier, yes or no? Is that a good number?
That sounds good.
Okay. I think if you go greater than 20% customization or integrations or whatever, it turns into a much harder project, and certainly not one that we would have been successful with this customer. So, did I answer your question? Okay, what other questions? Yes, sir.
How many steps have you undertaken in this transition? So have you moved from SAP to Odoo in one step, just in one moment? Or
Yes.
step by step?
No, in one step, and it was 6 months before we went live with the first part, Jen? Is that about right?
Yeah.
Maybe 4 months?
Yeah, it was really, there was, like you mentioned, some of the stuff we had to rebuild to emulate on their side, so there was a bit of work to be done there. I think that was about the right range before they made the
It-
actual switch over.
It's hard to be halfway into an ERP implementation, right? Yes, it is. To the extent you can break things up into smaller pieces and go live with smaller pieces, that's always the better approach. But for a case like this, we had to kill SAP. We had to put, we had to take a stake and like drive it into the vampire's heart here, so that it couldn't come back, and we had to do it in one big step. So, yes, please.
Okay, what was the biggest challenge that you met actually when you were transitioning from SAP to Odoo? So when your customer employees, they came to the office, they switched on, oh, here is Odoo. What was the biggest challenge after that?
Jen, what do you think?
Well, for me, from my perspective, it seemed less about a specific functionality piece and more about there were just some personality, it comes down to change management. There were some personalities that had been with the company for so long and just had their way of operating. So there was, luckily, Greg mentioned one of the team members on their side that had a key stake in the project, and she was an interesting personality because she always challenged us to say, well, how am I going to do this? What about, and she would tell like little tiny, the smallest nuance. But the good part of that is we supported her through the whole time of listening to her needs, telling her how things work. So she became part of the champion team when we actually went live, because all of the team members that had the same types of reservations could talk to her, and she said, I already asked them about that, and they said this and this and this, and so that actually helped tremendously with
There's a strategy we've seen that I think works every time we're successful at it, and that's try to turn your biggest skeptic into your biggest proponent or fan, right? If you can answer the skeptic's questions during that change management process, you know that you have buy-in. That's going to be the way to solve that. Yes, sir.
Did they have technical staff in the company, or was it
Limited.
expertise from you guys?
Limited technical expertise on staff. They've got a sysadmin, and we actually help them hire an intern to help with reports, because reports never end. There's always something to change on the report, right? So that's where we thought, hire an intern that we can teach to be your reporting guru, and we'll make them successful, and that worked out reasonably well. Okay, and I got 1 minute. What other questions? Marta? No? Okay. Nothing? Okay, again, thank you very much. This was a lot of fun.
Very cool. Now I have to shut this thing off. So Pavlov's bell. Pavlov Media is what I want to talk about. And I'm not Patrick. Unfortunately, Patrick couldn't be here. Patrick is the project manager and tech lead also at Pavlov Media, responsible for putting in this Odoo system in the company. And I'm filling in for him. My name is Wolfgang. And I can tell you a little bit about Patrick. He is not only, as I said, the project manager and tech lead, he also developed several modules for OCA, for the community. So he has really driven into Odoo. And so hopefully he can be here next year to tell you more about the story of Pavlov Media. I'm going to jump in and start with a little company overview. And even before that, I'm going to talk about this dude who is Ivan Petrovich Pavlov. And you already know he's the guy with the bell. And he is actually a fun fact about this guy who lived about 100 years ago and had a breakthrough experiment about conditioning dogs to study behavior of dogs and how to make them drool by ringing the bell, as I just did. He was supposed to be a priest. He wanted to go out, become a priest. He read a book on science, and that changed his life forever. And anybody ever had the experience to have a life change, like moving to Odoo and see a new world of things? So that was him, right? So he changed his life by reading the science book and has inspired a whole range of scientists ever since. And one of the people inspired was actually a guy that took the name of the company, and his name is Mark Cypress. Mark is a exceptional, inquisitive mind, and he, in his college years in Champaign, Illinois, at the University of Illinois, started to wonder, why is it that we have no real good internet here at our college campus in our dorms? And he crawled through spaces to put internet in and did this on his own and built up a whole media company doing just that. Maybe not crawling as much anymore, but installing internet services and expanding the services. And I will tell you a little bit more about Pavlov Media. So it has been around since '94, and it's really a telecommunication media company that doesn't just do internet. So some of the facts here are that they're now in 44 states, 170 university communities, and 700 properties that are served by Pavlov Media and their internet. But not just that, also video streaming and some other services I'm going to talk about. They are really in the business to provide exceptionally good bandwidth to their customers. And they have a primary market in the off-campus student housing. And this could also you probably know that in the United States there's a lot of off-student housing where people live not on campus but off campus, and they need internet and they need fast internet. Streaming data has become so much larger, or the requirements for streaming data. I'm going to show you some charts on that too. So what Pavlov does is they design, engineer, build, and then also operate and service all of their infrastructure that they make available. And they have an interesting business model to provide internet and video and voice services. Have you ever wondered where actually your Netflix videos are streaming from? Anybody know? Actually, they're not from a big, gigantic, huge server somewhere in the Netflix campus, right? So Netflix has actually decentralized all of their streaming services, and Pavlov Media is one of those companies that serve Netflix videos out of their location. It's not just Netflix, other services, Google searches and other things are also distributed all over the net. So that's what Pavlov Media does, and they have through their services a lot of experience in increasing bandwidth and using bandwidth efficiently. And you can see in the growing demand of bandwidth in the community how important this is. In just 2013, there was a small percentage or small bandwidth necessary to do whatever people had to do, and it was considered fast internet. Today, where everybody's on their video, YouTubes and other services, this is not sufficient anymore. You need to have really, really juicy bandwidth, and that's what Pavlov does. Another way to look at Pavlov is to look at their spread across the US and also in Canada. There's a central red hot spot. This is actually a heat map of their customers in the Champaign, Illinois area. That's where they started growing, but you can see how it expanded into Florida, the whole East Coast, and also now California and close to where we are. Pavlov decided after many years of using Microsoft Dynamics that Microsoft Dynamics is not the technology that really is going to help them. They needed to make a switch. And they looked at Odoo for several reasons. One is, of course, pricing. Odoo is about a third less, or it's about a third the price of Microsoft Dynamics, so it's an immediate cost saving. But it was also the completeness that Dynamics 65 or 365 did not really give them what they needed to do. And there was also a focus on the Microsoft side to go more into cloud and not support the on-premise version. And that was really something that didn't work for a company that's used to really housing and owning everything. So those were some of the parameters. Some more drivers were flexibility. They really needed more flexibility to customize it to their own workflows, and also to support multi-company functions. And what was enticing to Pavlov was the idea that there's a whole community that's building something together, making it better, and not just one company that I rely on. And you all know this. This is what makes open source and what makes the whole community strong, is that we have many people that come together and develop. And that's exactly the strongest driver that they experience. And you see that everything that I'll show is in the community, is today available through OCA, is available for everybody to download. So all the effort that went into this project is something that was made available to the public. So now we're talking about what actually happened. Of course, when people switch from Dynamics to Odoo, there are core modules that move over. But then these guys needed something very specific in field services. And this was before Odoo's field service module came out. And it's also extending it into a new realm, which goes beyond the field service module that are currently available, into something that is more enterprise services, enterprise field services ready. And enterprise field services or field service management links into many other modules within the framework of Odoo. So here are some of those. So you can see that field services has all of these touch points. It's not just accounting, but it's CRM and sales, and it's equipment and parts. So everything is. Are you familiar with field services? You need to. Yeah. Okay. So good. You also. What was this? Ham. Yes. Okay. Good. Ham. So field services is all about getting any people in the field out to the right customer at the right time, and doing the right quality of work. And it means that you need to have a schedule for everybody. You need to have skills and availability for everyone. You need to bring parts with you or equipment, install equipment that you need on site. So there's a whole range of things that need to be considered. And another highlighted module is the agreement module, because everything is driven by contracts with the customer. There are service level agreements that need to be considered and that need to be adhered to, and that's really a key thing of field services management. So this is a screenshot of a field service order, and if you look closely, I don't know if you can see it so easy, but it has stages of new, confirmed, requested, assigned, scheduled, and route, and it goes on to complete it eventually. And some of these actually have sub-statuses too. Everything can be planned based on customer requirements. The customer comes in and says, I want you to be there between 10 and 12 on a Tuesday. And then you basically schedule your services accordingly and try not to violate that time commitment. And you also may have skill sets that you need to adhere to. I need an electrician that's licensed to do this work. So you need to send somebody else that is actually the right person to do that electrical work or internet, fiber optic line work, whatever it is. So there is, in this case, it has a schedule date that's in red because it hasn't been confirmed with the customer. So I schedule this out as a draft, and then I confirm it with the customer. And when the customer is happy, I send somebody out. And I may send also out some equipment. So in this case, I have a piece of equipment, which is a power strip that I need to send to the customer. And it goes out through the regular inventory shipment process that everybody is familiar with, but it's captured within that service order so that the field technician or the dispatcher can see exactly what's going on and what's going out to the field. And in the back end, on the accounting side, I also keep track of that as an analytic account for this particular customer and customer location. A customer may have multiple locations, and a location may be subdivided into sub-locations. So let's assume I have a campus, I have a building, I have floors inside of that building and rooms and shelves. Everything is a hierarchy of locations, and this is reflected in the system so that up to the shelf level, I can identify any object that gets installed at the customer. And I know, because of analytic accounting, how much this location cost me or how much the customer consumed or services provided, and I keep track of all that financial data and just leverage Odoo to provide the reports and the invoicing, etc. Another thing I mentioned briefly was skills. So this is actually skill sets that are needed. And you see these stars, that these are skill levels. So not only can I define that I need an electrician or I need somebody that has a specific skill set, I can also say at what level are they skilled. Do I need a master electrician or just a novice? Is that enough? And based on that, I can match it to the requirements that the customer have. And work order management system wouldn't be anything without the ability to schedule work out. So in this case, we use an OCA Gantt chart. The reason we didn't use the Odoo one here is because it wasn't as nice as it is now in 13. So this is a cool thing to see what's coming up in 13. And we should think about switching that out. But this is the version that was customized. And it shows in color-coded patterns how, who's doing what work, what kind of work, which status is the work in. And as the day progresses, and you can see the day here, this is just the chart, the timeline for one day. I can see where the gaps are, where I can schedule new work. I can see whether capacity is exceeded. So this helps with capacity management for people in the field, right? So, and I see this visually right in front of me. And it's easy to drag and drop to a new person if I need to reschedule something or I need to assign work to another person. So this was phase one of field service management. And Pavlov teamed with OSI to come up with the whole requirements at the workshop. That's a process to really capture all requirements properly before any work starts, and then build this out, this whole FSM framework, and then make it available in OCA. There's about 20, or by now I think it's more, 24 or so modules available. And the whole system went live in July, and that was the FSM partner in accounting, etc. went live in August. And this was interesting because the whole process took only a few months to really complete. It was a very successful project for Pavlov. who's of course used to IT because they are a strong IT company. And sometimes it's interesting, who are the customers, who are you teaming with? And in this case, because of their experience, there was a synergy also that Pavlov had with their vendor, in this case, OSI. I want to talk a little bit about Pavlov and OCA, and you know the OCA booth is here, and OCA is a big part of the community. So all of these modules are ready for anybody to download, as I mentioned early on. And the migration from 11 to 12 went pretty smooth because the community actually chimed in and helped moving this over to 12. And it also included new modules that the community participated in. So not all of this development was done by Pavlov or OSI. A lot of people helped. And the next step is to integrate this with a mobile unit. So there's going to be a mobile FSM unit that plugs into this as well. And the benefits overall are that there is a lot more operational insight into the whole system, KPIs. So you see right away, what is my efficiency? Where am I not effective? I can look at the calendar and the scheduling, the capacity, and I know exactly how I use my resources and how am I using them most efficiently. So the optimized field service assignment and scheduling is currently happening manually. In the future, this may actually be automated too. So where routing tools are plugged in and this is done automatically. And I can talk for hours about automation and optimization, but I won't. That's a next year thing. So as a result, they already noticed an improved response time to their users. So everything goes much faster and more reliable. Schedules are easier to meet, which is a great thing, right? So we want to really strive for customer satisfaction. Additional benefits, as you can imagine, I mentioned the 1/3 of the cost. I mean, the whole cost has dropped significantly. So they're just able to be more profitable with higher quality. And the other thing that Odoo allows very well is the track and trace of all items through the system. So any equipment, any part that comes in is traced through the entire Odoo and FSM universe down to the customer. And some custom equipment that Pavlov deals with is actually owned by Pavlov and just leased out to the customer. And so these are assets that still need to be kept on the books, so they're not sold. And that makes it a bit more complex. So if you have some questions there, there's a whole lot to be learned in asset management and keeping track of depreciation and these kind of things. There's additional time saving through the whole process, so fewer people can do the work. That's always good because people can be used to do more field services and more customer-facing work instead of just dealing with administration. Next phase, as I mentioned, was mobile. That's one thing. And that includes keeping track in the field of every completed order, taking signatures down, having a good view on the mobile device of what the equipment is that is already installed at the customer site. And I can also tag some auto notifications prior to arrival that I send people. Are you familiar with geofencing? Anybody? Geofencing. So geofence is a virtual fence that you build around a location. Let's say it's 10 minutes out, and when I drive and I have my mobile device and I enter this 10-minute virtual fence, a message is automatically generated to ping the customer that I'm 10 minutes out. Isn't that great? If you have something like this, that's pretty cool. So route optimization, I mentioned briefly, is also on the future implementation list. Route optimization meaning that some algorithms assign the work and schedule the work. Yeah, and this is a brief summary of the work with Pavlov. Any questions? Thank you. Questions? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
So were there any key success criteria that you were tracking, like in metrics versus that you could share with us for, the reduction in time and all of that for using Odoo?
Yeah,
Like actual metrics?
I don't have them here because a lot of this is company internal data, so it's a little tricky to share. But yeah, there are internal metrics that were kept to make sure that things are compared to before and after, particularly when it comes to any automation or optimization. You need to have a before and after so you can really see the impact. So and that's what you're kind of asking is, yeah, this is data that the company keeps but not published. So, yeah, so I can give you a general understanding because I've done field services for about 20 years, and usually the savings are anywhere at the low end between 10 and 30%. That is what you people see. 10 to 20 is on the normal side, 15, 20%. 30 would be exceptional, and 10 is also exceptional because most of the time it's 15 to 20%.
Well, and one thing along those lines, there's the optimization for cost savings, but there's also generally an optimization for customer satisfaction or
Predictability.
yeah, when you're thinking about optimizations that are out there, if you were thinking about rank ordering, there's optimization for cost, but there might also be optimization for customer happiness or response time or SLAs. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about some of those optimizations and maybe for Pavlov? Or just in general? You probably can't talk about that.
Well, anybody that wants to quantify customer happiness has a huge challenge on their hands. I mean, you can have some star ratings, like we have Odoo to help us to capture customer satisfaction, and we see whether it's a 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, but realistically, you don't always get the full breadth of response because people don't answer. So it's not quantifiable per se, but what makes customer satisfaction quantifiable is growth in business and repeat business. And if you have repeat business, you can be sure the customers are satisfied. And one way to measure customer satisfaction is to see, did our repeat business grow, shrink, stay stagnant? And that's really where Pavlov is doing extremely well. Pavlov has a lot of repeat businesses. Property owners are the guys that make, basically they pay for these implementations. And property owners, they're large companies that build properties at Campus 1, Campus 2, and if they come back and they want new internet service, you know that you're doing something right. And that's the situation Pavlov is in. So Pavlov has that. Did I answer your question? I know it was a bit vague, but yeah, okay. Sure.
When you are talking about mobile app, are you using Odoo native mobile app or designing something from scratch?
We designed this actually from scratch because there was a little bit, it's a very, very focused application that doesn't really need a lot of the Odoo framework. It uses the Odoo API, of course, but it is very, very simple. You just display some work orders, you click complete, and all you want to see on your screen is that work order and maybe a few other things to drill into. But that was a conscious decision, but good question. I don't know whether it makes sense in the future to switch. Whenever we customize something, it has the disadvantages. It has an advantage to be really focused, but the disadvantage is it's not maintainable as much over time. The preference is always to use core product. That's any consultant will help to people to use core product whenever possible. So, but the answer is not yet, though.
app is online or offline apps, because sometimes the location have not access
Correct.
to internet.
Yes, anybody that deals with mobile knows the crux. You're out of internet service, you don't have any access, the servers are not available. What do? A good mobile app in this area will cache everything that you do. This version that we're currently on doesn't do that. The caching is not there. Currently, we assume connectivity is available. It's a step-by-step process. So, but eventually, I hope the Odoo framework will also allow caching of data on the mobile app. Hmm?
This company sells internet, you know, they must have internet.
Yeah, they carry the internet with them. Yeah. All right, I think we're almost at the end. One more question, and then we're done.
Excuse me. Are there any differences between this version, between the version 13 in standard Odoo?
So what I did actually, because I've done field services for the last 25 years, and Johannes, the product manager on the Odoo side, and we had a long chat, and we talked about where Odoo 13 is going to go. That happened last year, about a year ago. And so we brainstormed a little bit back and forth, and some of the ideas made it into 13, but of course, as a core product, you always have to be careful. You can't put everything in a core product because it has to meet so many people's requirements. And there's also, as you know, in the Odoo world, we put something in that is well defined, and then we grow it over time. And that's what's happened. So we didn't use the core FSM framework because it wasn't available at this time. But in the future, that will merge back together. But right now, Odoo is a well-defined package. This is pretty broad. Okay, I think this is now my time to say this presentation has ended. So that's the... All right.
All right, well, my name is Jared Kipe, and I am the president and lead developer of eBookCorp. We are a gold partner outside of Seattle, Washington. And today's talk is on managing commissions in Odoo. So those of you that aren't aware, commissions are kind of a form of compensation. It's effectively when a salesperson makes a sale and it turns into an invoice, they will somehow, through some mechanism, get a portion of that sale kind of back to them. All that said, so we have got some decisions and configuration that we need to talk about. First of all is, when do you recognize the commission as kind of a liability, right? So do you do it when the invoice is posted, or do you do it when the invoice is paid? A lot of times that's going to come down to kind of your overall accounting structure. So if you're accrual-based, you're probably going to do it on invoice posted. The next question is, what is kind of like the base amount that you pay your commission on? So for some people, that's the invoice total or kind of gross. Otherwise, it might be the invoice margin. Invoice margin would be more ideal in most cases because it's going to be lower, and more importantly, it's going to be more realistic of the actual profit for the sale. And it encourages the salesperson to kind of do the right thing for the company by making deals that are good for the company and not necessarily just the biggest sales they can make. So what is the commission rate for the employee? So there's a contract level field or fields for how they get commission. We have other ways of kind of calculating that commission as well. How do you pay back the employee? So unlike, say, an expense that is just basically if they use their own personal credit card and they submit a reimbursement for that expense, and you basically cut a check and send it out to the employee. Commissions are effectively basic wage. They're taxable, and you need to submit them through your kind of payroll company for withholdings and everything like that. And finally, we have kind of more advanced commission structures that live on the partner level, so that when somebody makes a sale for a specific customer, they will see a kind of special rate structure for who gets what, and that's useful if you kind of have like external agencies and things like that. So by and large, ultimately we want the commissions to be visible both from the accounting perspective and also the salesperson perspective, because it is supposed to be an incentive for the employee. So with all that said, we'll come over into Odoo. Probably make that a little bigger, maybe not that big. And these are the three kind of apps or modules that we're going to be talking about today. So we have the base EBU commissions, the commissions and pay slips, and then finally we have an open source invoice margin that duplicates some of the same kind of details from the sales order onto the invoice itself, or recomputes it really. All right, so let's start off with doing some setup. We can come over into the general accounting configuration and scroll on down to the commission section. So here's where we're going to set up kind of how the system will generate these entries. So we need a journal. The accounting, it's going to be a miscellaneous, and we'll give it com code. The default accounts here are for kind of the expense side of the commission, so where you would put that. So we've got a commission expense account already created. Then we come down to the liability account. That could be left blank, and in that case, what it'll do is it'll use the mapped employees home address partner, just like payroll does. But if you're going to be using payroll in Odoo, it's probably better. It's actually probably better if you're going to be doing it externally as well to give it a specific liability account. So we have a commissions payable. Keep in mind that this is just a general liability account. It's not anything specific about commissions. And then we get to our configuration for how we want to recognize that stuff. So we have the on invoice validation, which is pretty small when we're zoomed in like this. I'm going to leave it on invoice paid, that will be coming back here for a reason we'll see in a little bit, and then invoice margin, which I will leave alone as well. So with that configuration saved, we get to go on to the employee-specific configuration. So as I mentioned earlier, the rate for this lives on the contract level because it's probably part of your negotiation for your yearly contracts, or did I hit save? Maybe not. Normally it gets out of here when it saves. Give it a few seconds here. There we go. So we'll go into employee contracts. Oh, it stays in. Interesting. We'll go into employees. I will select my own employee here. And contracts. I have a running contract, and you'll see that we have two fields up here. we'll go ahead and edit, and we'll put 5% in here, and we'll change this one to 2%, and I'll discuss more about what that special admin commission percentage is in a little bit. So with that done, we're ready to make some sales. So we'll come over into sales, create some quotations. As I am the matched partner for this particular salesperson or whatever, I am the salesperson implicitly. We'll go ahead and choose a customer. Made a couple of products here for a high-cost item and a low-cost item. So if we order several of these, you'll note that we have margin calculations down here based on the cost of that product. And so the margin dollars here is basically what we're trying to kind of pay commission on. When we invoice this order, we'll be taken over onto the invoices page. And once again, we'll come over here and we'll see the salesperson. It's important. You can just create invoices and let the salesperson kind of be on the invoice alone kind of a thing. And you'll note that we have the same margin calculation, in fact, on the invoice. So when we post this entry, the commission entry is going to be generated. And we have a little smart button to get to it. So this is the entry that was generated. And ultimately, if we click on it again, we can see more information about it. So it's in a new or draft state, which means that it has not generated a journal entry yet. On the left-hand side, we have some information about that, the kind of setup of this commission, right? On the right-hand side, we have numbers. So the contract rate is ultimately over here. In fact, if we get into edit mode, you'll note that we can't edit the rate because it comes from this. You can also create commissions by hand using the manual, where you get to kind of feed in all of these numbers and let it do its thing. The base total is basically the gross of the invoice. Base amount in this case is going to be the margin, and then the amount is obviously the 5% multiplied times it, times the base amount. So normally, we can come over here and register payment and pay for this. And we'll get the invoice marked paid, but unfortunately the invoice, or the commission itself, sorry, is still in new, and we're going to have to confirm it by hand. That is a bug I was hoping to get worked out, but unfortunately I was not able to beforehand, so that's something to work on a little bit later. All that said, we have generated a commission entry, and if we look at it, or a journal entry in that commission's journal, and we'll see kind of, you know, exactly what you'd expect. We're debiting an expense, we're increasing that expense, and we're making a liability for this particular employee effectively in our commissions payable account. So let's go ahead and go into accounting one last time and go ahead and change the settings to on invoice posted so that our things go a little faster. Save again. Need like a Jeopardy music, the opposite of like Rainbow Man. The waiting music. All right, so let's talk about that admin percentage a little more. If we go into employees, we can find Mark. And he has a running contract as well. And we're going to give him 5% commission, or maybe 4%, just so it's different. The admin commission here in this case, sorry, we're going to leave this one empty because the real configuration here is the coach on the employee itself. So we're going to set the coach to admin, and some examples of ways that this kind of second commission rate makes sense. A lot of times you might have salespeople that spend a lot of time making deals, and maybe they input sales, but they don't like actually deliver them and work them all through. You might have administrative assistants or something to do that, so they may get some small percentage of the commission. The other time that we've seen this is if you have a sales team that has kind of like accounts or per contacts that are dedicated to salespeople, then a new salesperson may kind of like inherit a batch of accounts, and then the coach would get a small percentage of the commission for that employee, kind of a thing. So with that configured, let's go ahead and make another sale. And this time we'll do low cost item. Order 100 of these. We have that. Let's go ahead and not forget to switch the employee over to Mark. And once again, confirm and validate this invoice through. All right, we will see that we generated 2 commissions, and not so surprisingly, we will have a normal rate for Mark at 4%, and if we, and it also generated a journal entry. And we have a admin rate for the administrator's contact over here on the other commission entry. So we can kind of accrue commissions, but another important aspect of that is refunds and returns, right? So at EBU, we like to kind of stress a sale order focused kind of approach to returns. So we would traditionally do something like an RMA on here. But in this case, this product is set by ordered quantity, so we can just go ahead and set that right down. The line turns blue because it's reinvoiceable as a refund, and we'll go ahead and make a refund invoice for this. Same principles would generally apply if you refunded directly from an invoice. We just kind of recommend doing it this way. So here is our draft credit note, and we will confirm it. And once again, we get a commission entry off of that, that refund, basically, right? So we can talk about the last aspect of commissions, which is basically the customer-specific one. So customers don't have contacts installed, so I'll just go into Sales Customers, find Azure Interior as good as any, come over to Accounting, and in the accounting area we have a commission structure. So this is an object that's intended to be kind of created and shared between several contacts. It could be for an agency or maybe a specific employee that may be brought in contacts or something like that. So we'll make one called agency and edit it. And we get to add one or more of the kind of lines for this. So we'll add Abigail. We'll say that she was kind of the originator, and we'll give her a 20% commission. We'll add Mark at, say, 2%, and we'll add the admin at 0. So 0 in this case is a kind of little indicator that it should use the employee's contract rate for their current commission contract rate. So we'll go ahead and save that. Save. And we can make it an order, or we could create an invoice. So let's just go straight to an invoice. For Azure Interior, we'll add a product line. We'll go for the low cost again. We'll see that the margin still works over here. Let's order a couple of these and post. Actually, I'm just going to change the invoice date on that one, but that's all right. So we'll see that we have generated 3 commissions this time. The rate type is structure, and we have one for Abigail. We have one for the 2% for Mark, and then we have our normal contract-driven rate over here for the administrator. All right, so with all that said, commissions really should be kind of an incentive for the employees, which means we do expose the kind of commissions menu up here for the employees to be able to get to. Now, logged in as the administrator, I am suspiciously missing my other view. Interesting. I'm gonna just do an upgrade real fast. Must have forgotten a step earlier. Another good use case for that Jeopardy music if we had it, right? Shouldn't take too long, and hopefully we'll have a nice pivot view on that commission list as well. All right. There we go. Okay, so I am logged in as the administrator, so I can see ultimately all of the commissions. We have filters up here for the different states. We have all of our commissions in the confirmed state right now. If we were logged in as a salesperson, then we would just basically see the commissions that were for that specific employee, and they can kind of keep track of what they've accrued over any period of time, what they're expecting on the next pay slip, et cetera. So we have a bunch of confirmed commissions, but we really need to pay them now. So at the end of a pay cycle or the end of the month or something like that, odds are you'd come in here and you'd filter for the confirmed commissions. You would select off all of them and run a little action called Mark Paid. And what Mark Paid will do is it'll create new objects over here in the commission payments area. These are roughly analogous to the expense sheets, if you're familiar with the expense app. So in expenses, you submit one or more expenses on a single sheet, and they'll get paid together. Same kind of deal here, so we have a little bit of stats over here for the employee and the amount, and then we have a list of all of the specific commissions that are linked to it. And in fact, over here, we can see kind of an all up for all those that were just generated, and you can, of course, filter by dates and things like that. So if you use an external payroll agency and stuff, now would probably be the time that you would export this and take these numbers over to them so that they can actually pay it. But here at Odoo, we've been in payroll since 2016. So we're going to mark these all to be reimbursed in the next payslip. Button disappears, reimbursed in the next payslip shows up, and we're ready to go over into payroll. So we'll head to payroll. We'll do a payroll batch, create one for November, and generate slips. So we will take off all the employees other than the employees that we were talking about today, and generate. So we now have 3 payslips, and we can click on the little smart button for the payslips and take a look here. So we have, Mark Demo has a commissions other input in here, and if we go into salary compensation, or computation rather, we'll see that there is a line up here near in the basic that is effectively adding that amount into the basic or taxable salary. And then we have one or more lines down here for the various government bodies, right? We also have the commission smart button up here that we'll get to in just a little bit. But for now, what we'll do is we'll come back to the batch and we will generate a draft entry for the whole batch. A little preview for tomorrow if anybody goes to the US Payroll Talk. So we'll come over to the accounting information and we have a draft entry here. And there's our entry. So what we have are all of the partners. These are the home partners or private partners on all of the employees. And they have commission payables debits, basically. And then down here we have net salary for the actual amount that is still to be paid for all of these various bodies. So there's a government body in here. There's admin, Mark, and Abigail, all with their net salaries over here. So we can go back up to the payslip again and register payment. And this will take us, it'll generate a bunch of outbound payments thanks to some configuration that we have. And ultimately, this is a batch payment. So this would be really pretty much the time where you would generate your direct deposit and stuff like that. But ultimately, the commissions are included in here. So one last thing, oh, by the way, the batch, the pay slip batch gets the payment batch as well. So the last thing to talk about really here is that the commissions smart button up here, the commissions that are generated on the payslip here are linked to all of the commissions that were actually paid on the particular payslip. And in fact, at this point, all of them have a commission payment, meaning these are commissions, they all have commission payments, and all of the commission payments now have a payslip. So at this point, they're pretty much all set. So I'd like to open it up for questions. Yes?
On the customer-specific commission?
Yes.
Can you just do a single employee?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The other question was on the customer-specific commission structure. Could you only have a single one? Absolutely. So you can have as many as you want, including one. Oh.
My follow-up question. In, say, a couple years down the road, that employee's no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
How do you maintain that in the system? Do you have to go back and switch that out for every customer?
That's a good question. So that would be, so the question, oh, I guess you heard it this time. So that's a good question. So ultimately, it's the same as with any organization that, say, like applies a salesperson per employee or whatever. So that's one of the reasons why we would recommend probably making a relatively small number of commission structures if that's what you're intending to do, because ultimately you would just go to the commission structure and update it to a new employee, or you would run a server action to go and unlink it from all the partners or swap it out or whatever, right? There's a lot of flexibility there. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, I have 2 questions. Question number 1, if we want to pay, I noticed that those invoices weren't paid, right? They were just
That's correct,
validated.
yeah.
suppose I only want the commission to be calculated based on paid invoices.
Yes.
That's possible out of the
Well,
box?
it was possible in earlier versions of Odoo, and I'll make it that way eventually as well in this version. But we have a bug right now where the method that gets called when invoices are paid gets called on an empty record set right now. So I can't tell what actual invoices were just marked paid. So that's a bug that has yet to be fixed. But yes, it should be possible in the end, yeah.
Next question, aging invoices. Like we have different rates for different brackets. So let's say, for example, for the first bracket, you have first 1 to 30 days at 4%. 30 to 60 days at 2%.
So effectively, you'd like to pay a higher commission the faster the customer pays.
Yes.
So, I mean, that could be customized, I'm sure. Like we designed this module to be extensible primarily, right? So, if effectively the way that the commission object, we would defer creating the commission objects until it was paid. So we tend to create the commission objects when the invoice is validated, regardless of whether we actually mark or like finish the commission and generate a journal entry, or we just generate the commission entry. So instead, we would change that. So we would not make the commission object until it's paid, and then we would simply check, right, at that time what the aging bucket was and assign the rate then and there.
So customizing.
Yeah, it would have to be customized, right?
Yes. Is this a custom module?
Yes, this is modular.
It's in the store, in the app store? Or?
That's a good question. So it's not right now. If it didn't have a bug, it would probably be open source right now. That said, it's not going to be open licensed. We're going to be making a $20 a month basically charge for it.
Can it be modified with Studio?
Sure, although you wouldn't be able to do those particular things that you were talking about in Studio. You would need to be able to patch over the creation of the journal entry or the commission entry.
Is there a way to let employees have access to like details what they want to track? You know, which commission has been confirmed and paid, and so do employees have some type of access to all of that? Just their own commissions.
I'm not sure that I understand, and I might not hear you quite. You're asking if the employees can see when it's paid? Or
yeah, I mean, like, they want to track, which sales basically, that commission was for example.
Yeah, so if we would go to commissions, either as an admin or an employer or whatever, we have basically what it was related to, and that's not necessarily back to the sale order, but the totals and margin and stuff like that are there, so that in general, and they can see kind of the various metrics of we can add more measures, right?
Okay.
Is that an answer?
Yeah. Yes, so employee access would have access to that, basically.
Correct. They would only see theirs, right? So if I wasn't an administrator, then I would only see my particular employee's commissions.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was my question. Thank you.
Sure. I should add a graph view on here too, right? Why not? All right. Well, thank you for your time.